He'd be a ride to an away baseball game in the summer or a football game in the fall. For me, he was Poppy, Pops, and the dad that raised me. It's hard to find the words to do him justice. He was funny, loved without prejudice, hardworking, dedicated to his family and friends, loved telling his stories, believe it or not, could be rather patient. He had a superb ability to listen to your troubles and talk you through it. He'd give you the ability to solve the issue on your own terms and make you feel like it was your own idea. He could always be level-headed, sometimes something I still work on. You could be wound up and he could always bring you back down. His most proud attribute, though, was always his family, and he always put his family first. Dad was a hard worker. He served in the Navy for 4 years, the reserves for 4 more, and then he met Mom. After meeting her, he knew exactly what he wanted and married her 6 months later. This past October, they celebrated 58 years of love. They had 2 children, Jimmy and Keith. Then, as tragedy struck, they raised the third, being me. He had a grandchild, Abby, and a new great-grandchild, little James, Robert. During his own life, he operated and owned a printing business, a skating rink, furniture store, and then decided the rest of his career to farming at the family farm. He, his 2 boys, and Mom worked tirelessly, but it was always a labor of love. He smiled through all the work and passed his infectious smile on to the family. He'd often reminisce on Keith and his smile. He knew when he was in the field, the bigger the smile Keith had, the worse the breakdown would be. And you know he'd be in the middle of the field, no shade, at 2 o'clock with the sun beating down. He was a family man. He was always proud of his family. I remember a story from Uncle Jimmy's high school days. All the city boys would always be able to work out at the town gym, but the farmers always had to be out in the field working. So one day, Big Jim and Little Jimmy had gone to town to fix a flat and stopped by the school's weight room. Dad never was much of a gambler, but he wanted to show off his family. He bet the other fathers $20 that Jimmy couldn't bench press an entire rack of weights, but he knocked it out with ease. Dad was busting at the seams with pride. He took the money, went over to Harvey's to get the flat fixed. While he was there, he bought him Cokes and peanuts, and he did what he always did. He put the peanuts in the Coke and drank it. But that's not the only Coke and candy bar story Dad had. For years after he retired, he'd help Uncle Jimmy with the farm. And every time something needed to be worked on, he'd be the first to volunteer to go to the parts store and get supplies. Somehow, a nut and bolt would always be charged to Uncle Jimmy's account. It took Aunt Christy years to uncover what had been going on. With every parts purchase, he had a Coke and candy bar charged as a nut and bolt. I remember finding out when I got into medical school. UAMS always sent a very large acceptance package if you made it, but if you didn't, it'd just be a small letter. I was carrying groceries up the stairs at my college apartment when Dad FaceTimed me, holding up a massive manila envelope, grinning like a possum. He, Mom, and I all cried with joy. He never thought he would see me graduate college, medical school, or much less wed with a child. He was certainly proud of our son, James, and especially whenever my wife suggested to name him James Robert after him. I was very grateful that they got to spend 4 months together. He was also a big jokester, and we always did trick packages at Christmas. And Dad loved the teasing that came with it. There'd be bricks, marbles, smaller boxes wrapped to place into larger boxes, but the one that he had the most fun with was gifting me lacy underwear. This teasing started before Thanksgiving this year, but on Christmas morning, there they were, some lacy underwear. But Mom made sure he got his, and he was tickled to death that Mom had gotten him a pair too. Dad loved a good story. He loved all of his children. He had crazy stories that would keep us entertained, and I plan on passing them down to my son as well. I'm sure several of my friends remember the stories of Crazy the Cross-Eyed Chicken Hawk, or when the wolf would be chasing him and he'd feel the hot breath on his neck, and right before the wolf would bite him, he'd jerk him wrong side out and he'd be running the other way. He even had an invisible mouse that he would show from time to time. I remember my first hunting trip. I had to be under 10 years old, and Dad was going to take me deer hunting. Dad took me over to the farm with just a pop gun. We'd gotten up very early, before daybreak, climbed into a box stand, and we shot just about everything that day. Dinosaurs, cowboys, Indians, just about everything but a deer. And then on the way home, it happened. We hit a deer, and the hunt was a success. What a memory. He always said the music that we listened to wasn't real music. We were fans of country and rock and roll. Dad liked the Rat Pack, specifically Frank Sinatra. He was enamored by him, and all things Rat Pack. I found the most fitting song for Dad would be Frank's My Way. And I'd like to share a few verses that I found reflective of Dad. I've lived a life that's full. There were times when I've bitten off more than I could chew. I've faced it all, and I stood tall, and more, much more, I did it my way. Well, on Saturday, Dad, you had it your way one last time. There's a saying in our family that Uncle Jimmy started when he was young, before he could speak. It was me, me, me. It means I love you. And we always said that before leaving each other. And now, for one last time, me, me, me. You're dearly loved and will be deeply missed.
Not only was Mr. Walls a man of faith, his family is a family of faith. You'll notice there are several verses of Scripture they want to draw our attention to because God's people have drawn comfort and strength from His Word throughout the ages. And they want you to have that same comfort and strength that's available today. One of those verses is Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Now faith is